in August 1975, August 28th to be exact, 1975, our whole family's lives changed. Randy was 21 years old. He was living in a town about 40 miles from where we lived. Where he had grown up and finished high school there and had a lot of friends there. And we had to move because of my husband's job. We had moved away. And so Randy was living with friends in Avon Park, which was about 40 miles from where we lived. And I got a call. I'd just been out shopping with some of my friends and came home, and the husband of the friend that I was with told me that they were looking for me, that Randy had an accident, and that I was to call my husband as soon as I got to his house. So I called my husband, and our daughter, Gina, was still at home with us, and we headed down to Avon Park. And when we got to the hospital there, we found that he had, we did not even know what kind of accident until we got there, but he had a diving accident. They told us that the fifth vertebrae was messed up. They didn't explain to us anything about the fact that he might even that he was paralyzed. I had no idea that my son was paralyzed. He was already in and had an X-ray by the time we reached there. And they let me go in to see him in the X-ray room. And I went in, and I still did not realize that my son was paralyzed. It did not click in. But it was a horrible experience to see the condition he was in. Not even yet realizing exactly how bad it was. I walked out of that room and walked into the waiting room where the others was and passed out. And my pastor, the pastor of our church at that time, prayed for me and spoke a word of knowledge over me. He told my family, and they all looked at each other very strange because I was not a strong person. I had a heart condition. I had been in and out of the hospital all my children's lives. And I was, they thought, well, they did not know what to think of what my pastor was telling me. I did not hear any of it. But my sister told me later that the pastor of our church said, she is going to be the strong one. She is going to be the one that's going to help Randy through this. He's going to look to her, and her faith and her helping him is what's going to help to bring him through this. And my sister said that they all looked at each other in amazement, knowing Betty, with all of my weaknesses, all my sicknesses that I had had and everything. But anyway, we left that hospital that night. They sent us to a hospital in Winter Haven, which was about 35 miles away from there, to a specialist, to a neurologist. And when that neurologist checked him, was the first time that I realized that my son was totally paralyzed from here down. He so bluntly told my husband and I that he would never walk again. And there is no words that can explain how I felt at that time when they told me my 21-year-old son, who was very active, rodeoed, played ball, rodeoed, was just a very active, big, like he'd been a bodybuilder or something. He was such a strong young man that he would never walk again. And our only son and our oldest son, it was a time that I just felt like, my husband and I both felt like our lives you know, we just looked at each other like, this can't be. And I said to the doctor, he's only 21, and he said, I'm sorry, ma'am, but I can't help that. He will never walk again. And then a little later, he gave us a little hope. He said, within 72 hours, we will know if there's anything going to come back. But we waited, we watched for every little movement. Every time he had a muscle spasm and his toes would move or something, we thought that he was beginning to get some movement back. We waited and we prayed. They didn't even have to operate on his vertebrae because his vertebrae had slipped out, come back and severed his spine totally. And they didn't have to do any surgery on the vertebrae itself because it had already done the damage and slipped back and was back in place. But they operated and put tongs in his head. All of this was an experience that it looked like more than what we could bear. And had we not known God, my husband and I found a spot. We didn't know where the chapel was, but we found a bench. And we just knelt down and prayed and asked God to take care of our son as they operated and put the tongs in his head and to please give him back to us and to make him whole again. And our faith, we trusted and we believed that this would happen, and Randy believed it would happen, and we still are believing today for this to happen. But anyway, he moved so much more rapid than they had ever had a quadriplegic move before. They told us that he would have the tongs in for at least 3 weeks. In 3 days, they had those tongs out of his head. They had put a brace on his body, and they had moved him out of intensive care into a room. They had taken him off of the bed that rotated back and forth, because he was doing so good until they thought that he was going to be all right without it. And so they just put a brace on his body and sent him to a regular room. And they let me stay with him day and night there. But he was doing really good as far as being able to breathe, having no problem breathing for about 2 weeks. And then he began to have a lot of problem breathing. He couldn't, he had to be suctioned continually to get the fluid out of his lungs that was collecting in his lungs. And they even taught me something that I thought I would never be able to do. But when you're child, there's something wrong with your child, you do anything in the world, anything that comes about to do, you will do it. Because Randy, I suctioned him all day, one day, and I knew he was getting worse and worse because there was so much fluid there, so much fluid on that lung. And they came in and got him and took him and made x-rays and came back and told me that they were going to have to put him in intensive care because he had a blood clot on his lung. And that was the problem. And they didn't know whether he would make it or not. This was Thursday. During that day, Thursday, when I had to suction him for so many times, I had finally prayed and said, God, he's yours. He's yours. I don't want to see him suffer. And I gave him to you when he was a little boy. I dedicated him to you. And his dad and I both dedicated him to you, and we gave him to you, and he's yours. And when they told me the news of the lung,